Welcome to the first event of our 2022 Lit Fest in Galena, Illinois. This is our 7th Galena Lit Fest, so I really appreciate you all being here and that we can keep this event going every year. My name is Larissa Disler. I'm the Adult Services Librarian at the Galena Public Library, and I've been running Lit Fest since the beginning. And I just want to thank our sponsor, the Friends of the Galena Public Library. They very generously provide us funds for this festival every year. I also want to thank anyone who donated, anyone who is in attendance, anyone who shows any interest in our festival at all, and of course, all of you who are here tonight, and Lucy for moderating, and the Soon to Be Famous project, because I think it's a very worthwhile project that's really helping out a lot of people. I think it definitely has a mission that we support here at our library and in our community. Now I'm going to turn everything over to Lucy Tarabor, our moderator. She's a part of the Soon to Be Famous committee.
Yep.
And I will let her take over from here. Thank you, Lucy.
You're welcome. Thanks, Larissa, and thanks for putting this on. It's amazing that you've kept it going for 7 years, even with COVID. It's very commendable, and I'm glad that you're doing it. I have been on the Soon to Be Famous committee almost since the beginning, not quite, but I came in year 2. And I'll tell you just quickly a little bit about it. It was kind of the brainchild of a group of library marketers who attended the 2013 American Library Association annual meeting and heard a speech by David Vinjamori, who is a brand expert and an NYU professor. And he talked about the importance of libraries in the era of ebooks and self-publishing, which at that time was really just beginning to kind of explode. And he challenged libraries to wield their power by taking a self-published author and sort of lifting them up to success, to fame, as we talk about it, to kind of prove that libraries really do have power. It's not just the big 5 publishers that have the power. And we're just thrilled that through the years since we've done this, we've uncovered so many wonderful, wonderful books. The contest started, as I said, in 2013. In 2014, we had our first winner. We were only opening it up to adult fiction, and we did that for a few years. Then in 2019, we thought, all right, what else could we do to support authors? And we thought, well, we could take folks that are just at the manuscript stage, but not yet self-published or published, and have a contest on manuscripts, and then with the winner receiving some services like editing and book design, cover design rather. And so in 2019, we began the manuscript contest in addition to the adult fiction contest. And then this year, we're really excited to say that we opened a Spanish language category this year. So now we've got 3 different contests going, and there may be more on the horizon. I'm not sure, but we'll see. But it's been a great journey. So thank you. I'm so glad that I had an opportunity to meet you all through this. Can I ask each of you to just real quickly introduce yourselves, and then we'll get into the questions. Anne-Marie, you want to start? You're next to me on the Zoom.
Sure. Well, I'm Anne-Marie Mannion, and I won the 2021 manuscript contest for my novel called Veritas, which follows a woman who's living in the South in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War and decides to move north, and she moves north to Galena. So, when she's there, she's trying to reconnect with a friend, but when she arrives, her friend is missing. So that's starts her off on her journey.
Great. Hollie, you want to go next?
Yes, I'm Pascuala Herrera, and I'm the winner of the Spanish piece of the contest, which is de la Página La Fama. And I wrote a memoir outlining my life and being a Latina with a disability who immigrated from Mexico, and all the obstacles I faced and how I became an educator and live a pretty much normal life.
Thank you. Otto, you want to go next?
Sure. Otto Schafer, and I won the 2020 Young Adult Fiction category. And I write contemporary fantasy, and it's young adult, so coming of age. And in this story, it's actually a series, but in this first book, some teenagers in Petersburg, Illinois, come across the journal in the basement of a Victorian, and it kind of sets them on this journey of who wrote this journal and where is it leading them. And in an alternate storyline, we have Brienne, who is spending time with her father, who's a world-renowned archaeologist, and she gets to travel the world with her dad, and they get themselves into a situation and unearth a magical catalyst, and that sets them on their journey. And the fun part, I guess, about the story is seeing how Brienne's journey comes together with the boys in Petersburg and how that all ties in. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. And Holly?
Hi, Hollie Smurthwaite. I won the 2019 manuscript contest and then the 2020 adult fiction contest. My novel was The Color of Trauma, which published this year. Yay! And it's about a memory reader, which is somebody who can experience other people's memories and take away traumatic memories, who helps a Chicago cop hunt down a serial killer.
Wow, so many different storylines. This is really fascinating. I'd like to talk a little bit about what led you to writing in the first place. How did you come to decide that you wanted to be a writer? And I'm gonna ask Pasquala first to address that.
Yes, it was very unplanned. I had worked at a community college as a college professor for almost 30 years, and I decided to retire. But then the pandemic hit, and so all my leisurely activities I had hoped to do, we were in lockdown. So my daughter suggested that I write all the stories that I had shared with her growing up, particularly as a way to remember my mom, who had passed away just a couple of years prior to my retirement. And so I decided, yeah, I have time now, so why not? And I started to write, and actually all these stories came to mind, and it was very therapeutic for me as a way to grieve for my mom. And at that point, I still didn't think I was going to publish. It was just me writing, like free writing. But after I shared it with some of my immediate family, my brothers and sisters, more so to get in their feedback about the early years, since I wasn't going by memory, but more from stories that my mom had told me. And they and my whole family said that it needed to be published. So then I went through the traditional method, and everything that they tell you is true. You don't hear anything back from agents, and I was just getting impatient. And I had the time, so I started to do research about, self-publishing, and I decided to bite the bullet, and I published it in March of 2021.
Holly, you want to talk about your writing journey?
Yeah, so when I was young, when I went to college, I actually studied acting. I thought that's what I was going to do. So I kind of came into writing sort of through the side. But I'm very glad, because the stuff that I learned as an actor helps immensely in my writing. So that's sort of how I came about it. I just had an idea. I went on a trip in 2008 to Bruges, Belgium. And I was sitting in this really old cathedral. And I remember thinking, we don't have anything that old in the US. And I was thinking of all the people who had been there before me, thousands of years, and what they would have felt and stuff. And I was like, what if there was an angel in here and it was sucking in everything? And that sort of tipped me. I started thinking that, and that was like in 2008, and I didn't start writing that till 2013. And then I wrote like 2.5 novels in a trilogy, and then I was like, it's too much, it's not going to work, and so it's in a shelf. And so this, The Color of Trauma, was the story I wrote after that. So that's how I started.
I'm curious, what finally pushed you over the edge to go back to it after you set it on the shelf?
Oh, I didn't. So that angel story is still, it's still got a place in my, I keep thinking one day I'll go back and try to fix it.
Oh, okay, that's cool. Anne-Marie?
Well, as a kid, I always loved reading and writing, and I grew up, became a journalist, and so continued to write, but I always had the idea or the goal of wanting to write a novel. And I kind of struggled with finding an idea, and eventually when I went to Galena, that kind of spurred my imagination to come up with this character who ended up being the focus of my novel.
Otto?
Yeah, I think I was just sitting around telling my wife about this idea to write a book, and I was expressing her, like, so she's like, tell me about your idea. So I started going into it, and then I think like an hour later, she was like, all that's in your head? And I'm like, yeah, it's all in there. And she's like, you should write that down. So, I mean, that's really how it started. Now, I do think that I always wanted to write, even when I was in my 20s, but I had kids really young, and, you know, work and career and all those things. And my kids are grown and out of the house now. So, you know, in I guess it would have been 2016, I think I started writing The Secret Journal. By the way, Holly, you said the name of your book. Awesome. I did not. The Secret Journal. So I started writing that, yeah, back in 2016, published in 2019. Have not written anything before that, other than, you know, maybe dabbled a little, but never really wrote. And when my wife gave me that advice to, yeah, you should sit down and just do it, I started and just poured out. I could literally write for hours and hours a day on that first book. I mean, it was, and really the first 2 books were in one, and my editor was like, yeah, this is like 200,000 words. You might have 2 books here. So, you know, we parceled that out ultimately, and it did become 2 books. But that's kind of how I got into it.
Yeah. Your stories are all so different and come at things from such different angles. Can you talk a little bit about why the subject matter is so meaningful to you? The subject matter that you chose to write about? And you just pop up. You don't have to wait for me to call on you.
Well, I can start if you don't mind. I think that this pandemic has really isolated us more than normal, you know, and I thought to myself that this was the perfect time to share my story, because it is a positive story of overcoming obstacles. I had the odds against me. I got polio when I was an infant in Mexico. I crawled around the streets in Mexico. And my parents, like many immigrant families, did the sacrifice of bringing me to this country. And through their support and efforts and my perseverance, got educated and got a very successful career, though I never walked. And so I think that my story really has touched people, because I talked to, through the book, I share that, by the way, the title of the book is Not Always a Valley of Tears. And that was because my mom used to tell me that life was a valley of tears, as a way for me to never give up and to persevere and to just push forward, even with pain. And after writing the book, I realized that life wasn't a valley of tears. And I've had extraordinary experiences with disability and all. With 12 surgeries and 8 broken bones, I still have a beautiful family, a home, a career, friends. So I'm very blessed. And so I wanted to share that message with people. So I think it's the perfect timing to encourage others who may think that they cannot get through whatever obstacle they have.
Right. Thank you. Now, your subject matter is one thing, and then we've got some science fiction sort of fantasy going on, and then we have historical fiction. Who wants to jump into their subject matter and why it's so important to them, why it means something?
I could go. So my basis, so like I have a fascination with serial killers. I have like this love-hate relationship because I mean, like they're like the worst of humanity. So when I wrote the story, I didn't want it to be all about the serial killer, so I made it mostly about the victims. And I used to volunteer for the Chicago Rape Crisis Hotline. So I've heard a lot of stories about people who've gone through horrible, horrible things, and how it's amazing how they all deal with it in a different way. And I wanted to show that because I think a lot of times when something bad happens to a person, if they don't act in the way that society expects them to, then they get like re-traumatized all over again because they were supposed, you know, it's like, oh, well, it couldn't have been that bad because you seem chipper or whatever it is. You know, you didn't tell anybody, well, then how bad could it have been? So on, so on, so on. There's all these expectations. And so I wanted to address that kind of to the side because hitting it straight on becomes like a soapbox. So I did that through this like fantastical vehicle, but that was my inspiration.
Well, I'll go next. I've always been drawn to stories that feature women as strong main characters. And so when I started thinking about what my book would be about, I knew that I wanted it to be about a woman and how and her journey. And I also am intrigued by the Civil War era. I found out while I was doing my research that my family had a great-great-grandfather had served in the Civil War, and 7 of his sons did as well. So that kind of, it just is intrigued me, and I wanted to put myself in another era and try to figure out what would it be like to have lived then.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Otto?
Yeah, for me, diversity was, it has been and remains, you know, for me to have a book and create a book with diversity. So my hope was always to have, you know, a young person pick up my novel and then read that and feel like they could be anything they want to be. And part of that, when I say diversity, you know, I feel like my stories cover just about everything from in a fantastical way, but I even have a, you know, a sentient tree that is by nature male that identifies as a female. I have quite a diverse cast of characters, and I just, for me, that's important. And it's important too that as I write these characters that I break stereotypes, you know, through these characters as well. So that is something I'm very proud of, and it has been very important. It's important in my personal life. It's important, you know, for me and as a whole.
Did your book, the writing of your book, change you at all as a person? Do you feel like you came out of it a different person than when you walked in? How about
I
you?
do, because I never thought, I was thinking I couldn't do this. You know, it was, my novel turned out to be 100,000 words, which I understand is kind of on the long side. And I'm just so proud that I mean, whatever else happens, I'm very proud that I was able to do it, to finish it. So I guess I learned that I can finish a novel.
Yeah, I'd agree. I you know, for me, I think it certainly changed me, and I learned, you know, everything from writing process. I probably did everything, you know, the first book, they'll tell you takes the longest, right? And for me, that was true. You know, I published in 19, I started writing that thing in early 2016, and I rewrote a lot. So, you know, having a great editor that I found along the way, who's with me today, you know, we're still working together on the 4th book right now, and just learning process, learning writing, but then on the other side of that, learning publishing and learning marketing and taking some marketing classes and all these things. So certainly it has changed me for sure.
Hmm.
For
And the
me, it
people you
changed me
meet.
the same way the other two authors have mentioned, but in addition, personally, it changed my viewpoint about myself, which I wasn't expecting. Throughout the book, I share my life, and I put myself very vulnerable, sharing real feelings and real pain that I went through in my life. And I came out really sure of my identity, because throughout my life, I've had this kind of conflict with myself about my disability. Is it something to hide? Is it something to be embarrassed about? Because that's what people always look at first. But after writing the book, I came to realize that that is so much part of my identity, and that I cannot hide it, and I don't want to hide it, because that's what has made me be the person I am today. And prior to writing this book, I don't think I was there yet. And so in that way, personally, I think it helped me out a lot. And then being on this pandemic really kind of highlighted this truth for myself, because throughout my rhetoric has always been, I wish people would see me before my disability. And right here, people don't see my disability, and I miss that. I'm like, people, I have a wheelchair. Really, I am in a wheelchair, even though you cannot see it. And so that really highlighted how much I really see it as part of who I am.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I haven't changed like as a person. I think my connection is too fantastical, but I have, as the rest of you grow as a writer. I think everything you do makes you grow as a writer, but particularly when you have to publish something, it's like you learn a whole bunch of things, and then you just have to hope that the next time you do it, you make far less mistakes and you work far faster.
Oh, yeah.
We were talking a little bit before we officially began about what do you do when you come to a difficult spot, and I guess the question is, what is the most difficult part of writing for you, and how do you deal with it?
I think for me, and this is a weird thing, it's knowing when it's done at every single stage, other than the first draft. You know when the first draft is done, but is that you like for that book, I went through so many rounds of edits, and it's hard to know when to stop, right? Because at the next point, then like I had a developmental editor, and it's like, okay, and then he would give me feedback, and I was like, okay, is it done? Is it ready for the line editing? And then is it ready for the copy editing? And then once the copy editing is done, when you go the formatting, you're like, I can't change anything. Like it's like a huge hassle once everything's been formatted. And it's really hard to know, like to finally let go and know that something's done. Like I could have worked on that novel for the next 10 years, I swear. But at some point you have to say like, okay, I'm done. Yeah. And for me, that was really hard to know when.
Anybody else have a tough?
I think for me, it helped a lot to talk about my plot with a friend or someone who would give me some feedback, and that always motivated me, because I would see that, oh, this person is engaged in what I'm talking about, and that would make me think, oh, this story must be good if they're interested in it. I've described a problem or an issue or something with my character that I want to fix, and they would give me ideas, and that just inspired me, because I thought, well, if they're interested, then other people will be interested.
Yeah, to get a little positive feedback.
Yeah, or just input.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if we're talking about, just difficult parts of the writing process, I use real locations. And when you use real locations, there's this accountability, right, to trying to get those right. At least to an extent, right? And you're going to fictionalize a real location. And so I have locations in Mexico, locations in Canada, and I have locations, in Illinois. Some of those places I've been to, some I haven't. It is really a challenge to just, thank God for Google, and, because I don't know how I would do it without it. But I feel like, now more than ever, we can really get pretty close to the location. So locations for me is always tricky. Timelines for me are always tricky. So especially when you have a lot of moving parts and alternating storylines, then timelines are always a challenge for me. And I am fully a discovery writer, so I don't plot. I don't like outline at all. If you were reading my book and you're surprised by like the characters, I was too when it happened. I was like, whoa, look at this. We're going here. Okay, we're going here. You know, so it's just, and that's part of what I think makes it so thrilling and fun for me to write. But you know, I mean, also, and I learned through that process. I have a very distinct place that I'm going to. So at the end of a chapter, I know where the chapter needs to go. At the end, I know where I need to end at. I know where the book ends at, and I know where the series ends at. So each time I go into a book, every chapter, when I start to write it, I know what my goals for that chapter are and where it ends. But I don't pre-plan it, and it can take turns along the way. Trust me, it goes crazy places. And sometimes I get extra chapters and things just happen. And I tried to outline, and it was very pointless for me. I really just, you know, 1 or 2 chapters, then I'm going off on a whole nother thing, and I wasted all that time outlining because it just doesn't work. So for me, that, you know, that's the challenge, is just locations, timelines are tough for me, and making sure that I get those right. You know, travel, I've got a lot of travel in my books. We're going places, and you got to be true to how long that takes. It frustrates me when I read a book and it's like, you can't get from here to there like the next day. How'd they do that? They don't even have a car, you know. It just, so you want that to be believable. So those are some of the weird challenges that I work through. And my editor helps a lot with timeline. When she'll be like, no, I think we're a day off here, and we'll work through that. So that's,
Yeah. I'm very much a writer like Otto, where I didn't have an outline. I just
go,
you know, just go and see. Because in some areas I focused on people, on others on events, on other, you know, on teachers, you know, and I had no plan on why I did it the way I did. Another thing I'd like to add is that for me, the most challenging piece was in the Spanish, because I have it in both Spanish and English. And though I'm bilingual and fully fluent in both languages, some parts I really had to be careful in the translation, because I wanted it to be more for colloquial from Mexico, from where I'm from, because I knew that would be the audience. But yet I also wanted it to be meaningful for any Spanish speaker. And so for me, that was the challenge, is in the translation and making sure, you know, that I did it right. For example, in the US, we talk about, you know, we don't use the metric, but in Mexico, we use the metric. And so Google was very helpful for me to translate when I was talking about miles, you know, into kilometers, you know, and in that way, so that it made sense in the Spanish version.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know,
Can I ask you guys, do you find it easier to draft or easier to edit? Like drafting is easy for me, but editing's harder. How about you guys?
I love both. I love
I
the
think,
editing process.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, I don't even know if there's a difference, honestly, you know, based on your question. You know, I retired in June 2020, and by March I had the book. So it all became just a one big project all together. So I'm not sure if, you know, I can say, oh, this is a draft versus this is, you know, it just didn't work out that way for me. In a big way, I always say that sometimes I felt like I wasn't even the author, because I would reread. I'm like, wow, I wrote that pretty cool. How I described that event.
Yeah.
And I shocked myself. I feel like, who wrote that? You know, and it was like, oh, it came from my fingers, you know. That is weird. Like if you put it away for a while and then you go back and read it, and I'll think, I don't even remember writing this. You know, it's like it was done by a different person, but so it's kind of a fun discovery to see what you did.
Yeah.
It is. I've been having the Audible books made, and it's really interesting now, a couple years later, to go back to the first book and listen to the Audible, because I'm checking it, right? So I'm going through, you know, line by line with the narrator. So I hired a narrator to do it, and I'm going through it, And then I'm listening and I'm like, so to hear somebody acting out your story and it's like, it's so, you're like, I wrote that. Did I do that? It's so, it is. I do feel that. Yeah, that's, oh, I was also going to say, Pascuala, I have a lot of Spanish in my series. And so for me, one unique thing was not so much in the first book, but by the second and third book, my editor, we actually had to hire a Spanish editor as well to go in and just check my Googled, because that's what I did, is I Googled all the Spanish that I wanted in there. And then we had to go back and check it and make sure, oh, was that accurate? Did we get that? And I had a lot of corrections there, but so there is some of that in the archaeological sites in Mexico that we're working through. So yeah, it was interesting to go through and do that Spanish piece as well, especially since I don't speak Spanish. It's a challenge for sure.
And what would we do with Google?
Thank God for
That's what
Google.
I always tell my kids. I'm smarter than you. I went through college without Google.
Yeah, Google makes things easier.
Yeah.
So and I'm not sure exactly what, if any of you write full-time now or not, but what I'm asking is, well, how do you maintain your work-life balance being a writer and still have time to do your writing?
I do work full-time career. I work probably 10 hours a day is pretty average for me. And some days are longer. HR manager. So, I mean, some days I'm working longer than that. Some days, 10 is about as good as it gets. So, yeah, I write fantasy. I work in an area in my life that's more legal. I was a labor rep before an HR manager. So that's a lot of, maybe drier type of communication and stuff that I did, right? So for me, this is an escape. I want to come home and write and think about dragons and sentient trees or whatever craziness I've got going on in my head. So for me, that's a nice escape from my work. So you have to enjoy it or you couldn't get the words down, right? So it's never like, oh, I got to write. It's always like, ooh, I get to write, right? I get to go, now I get to sit and write for a few hours or whatever. So that's how I kind of unwind, I guess.
That's great.
Yeah, I work full time, and I look forward to Saturdays or Sundays when I have a block of time where I can sit down and write, because, that feels so good, because sometimes it takes me a while to get back into my story. And then once I get in, I don't want to pop out again. And so I like to, it takes time to get into it. So I like to have a block of a few hours at least where I can sit and write.
Well, I feel that writing has become my second career without me even intending it, because I retired and that's just what I do now. And I published another children's book in September and started writing my third book. And my daughter says, no, Mom, only 2 books per year, put it away. And so, I hope to get my third book out in this year, and
Awesome.
I'm going to, so I don't see it as a hardship. I have to slow myself down. For me, the challenge is more with the patience of working with qualified editor and all the other pieces with self-publishing. That's the challenge. The writing itself, I feel I got ideas up the wazoo, I do hope in the future I can transition to more, into fiction, novels, but everything I read says that it's really difficult to transition, but who knows? I'll try it in the future.
And I'm lucky enough to have a husband that supports me. So I have a son who's going to be 8 next month. So when he's at school, then I can pretty much write all day. And so unlike Anne Marie in the weekends, I'm just like, oh, don't you guys want to go to the field museum or something? So I also really love to write. So I spend a lot of time doing it.
Oh, that's great. I want to ask you a little bit about self-publishing, why you chose to do it. And then Hollie, I know you are published traditionally as well, correct? No.
Nope.
Oh, okay. I got that wrong.
That's
All right.
okay.
Well, let me hear your ideas on, or why you decided to go the self-publishing route.
So when I won the contest in 2019, I was like, I'm going to get this traditionally published. And I sent out maybe 10 or 15 queries. And every time I sent one out, I felt horrible. I mean, awful. Like, it made me not want to write. And it wasn't even getting rejections. Like, I didn't even care about that. For some reason, it was like this psychological barrier. And then over time, I heard so much about self-publishing. And then finally I talked to my husband and I was like, what do you think? Because the downside, of course, to self-publishing is you have to pay for everything yourself. You get traditionally published and it takes you 2.5 years to get published, but they pay for your editing, they pay for your book cover, they pay for all that stuff. And then we just decided we could afford it. And I was like, all right, we'll see how this goes. And so then we hired, then of course you have to find everybody, right? You have to find every little piece that you can't do yourself. A lot of pieces that you shouldn't do yourself if you can afford not to, like editing. You can self-edit, but it's so much, you can only see what you can see, right? You need an outside eye.
I also felt sick with the query letter, so it's funny you say that.
Right?
So I started sending them out, and I just was not in peace about whether I wrote enough, whether I wrote too much, whether this is what they were looking for. And in a way, you put your soul out there, and then you hear nothing. And you're like, did they hate it? Did they not like it? And you don't hear back. Or when you do, I'm sorry, your matter is not what we're looking for. And so I'm a control freak. And I realized that giving that control away was killing me. Literally, it was giving me ulcers and stress. So I started researching self-publishing, and with the family support and encouragement, I decided to go that route. And now I really think that's the only route I'll have. I think I love that I have, earlier we were talking about our book covers and how, you gave revisions back and forth. I love that because everything that's in my book, I had a say in it. Whereas I think the traditional method, that might not be so. There's other decision makers. So yes, we have to pay up front, but I rather pay to have the control, but that's who I am.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I agree with that. I did a lot of research around self-publishing and traditional publishing, and I'll tell you, I've never sent a query letter out. I decided pretty much right away that I was going to go this route of self-publishing because, and Hollie, you touched on it, they'll pay for things if you're lucky enough to get a deal. But the thing is, your work as an author doesn't stop just because you're traditionally published. They still have an expectation that you're going to promote, that you're going to, use your social media, that you're going to run ads even. There's a lot that you are still required to do. And guess what? If your book doesn't sell based on what work you're doing and the little amount of work that most of the time a traditional publisher is going to do for you, then they'll just kill it. It'll be done. And then what you've lost is you've lost control. You can't say, well, I'll just take it back and I'll try to do this myself. No, you don't get to do that, right? They've pretty much bought the rights to that. So, there was a lot of control for me too. I wanted to be in control of my work. Like you talked about having a say on the book cover design work, hiring the editor, working with that person. There's just a lot that, when you edit with traditional, the editor has a lot more say over your work and what gets pulled out, what stays in, where you are more of a partner with your editor. At least I am with my editor, in the self-published space. So I guess, the downside would be that you don't have that, I'm traditionally published kind of tag on but I don't know that matters as much anymore. It doesn't matter to me. But yeah, I just really feel like, having control of it, being able to do my own thing with it, its success is really in my hands more than someone else's hands. And I just was really leery about that the more and more I researched. And my wife would tell you that I research things to death. And she's like, even a purchase for it, she's like, just buy the thing already. You've looked at 20 of these things and you've looked at all the, just buy the thing. So I tend to maybe over research, and I think I probably have done, certainly a lot of that with the self-publishing space. So, and that's kind of why I decided to go that way.
And Anne Marie, I know that yours is at the manuscript stage still.
Right, I'm still editing, and
Yeah.
so I'm very convinced by these arguments that I'm hearing about how self-publishing is the way to go. And I haven't decided, I'm not sure yet how I'll proceed, but it's self-publishing does sound appealing from what I just heard.
There's certainly great success stories in traditional too, and I would never knock anybody for their decision to pursue traditional or self. It's certainly a personal choice. Just for me, and trying to be realistic to how many Andy Weirs there are, and how many are these people that are
Right.
gonna just you get this your one book and then it just blows up is pretty phenomenal to have that happen. And so but there's plenty of indies making a great living, right, running ads and selling their books. Now maybe it's not Harry Potter living, but it's they're doing anywhere from a couple thousand to $20,000 in sales a month. Those examples are out there. So that seems like a more realistic goal as a self-published author than maybe trying to get that traditional deal.
How are you guys marketing your books?
So for me, it's a little bit of Amazon and Facebook and then social media. And I think, I'm starting to dabble in TikTok. I don't know if anybody else is messing with TikTok, but people are talking about how TikTok is a great way for authors to build an audience and really start to see some increase in sales. And I've started to play around in that space. And I'm seeing some TikTok authors, as they call them, really blow up on TikTok. So that's something that is maybe worth looking into as well.
It depends on what
it's
your
a-
goals are.
Yeah, I mean, it does.
So
That's a great point.
if you want an award, you need to be traditionally published, right? If you want to be on, the late night shows or whatever, you have to be traditionally published. There's things like that, but you can, you could be a New York Times best-selling author, self-published. It's very, very difficult, but you could do it. So it really depends on what you want, right? If you
True.
want to make money, I think self-publishing, actually, you have much more flexibility, because if you're traditionally published, you can't say like, hey, for this week, I'm going to sell my book for 99 cents.
Nope.
You don't have that kind of control. You can't say like, I'm going to run these ads and those ads. You know what I mean? Like you can't, if your cover's not working and you're traditionally published, you can't go like, hey, let's do a new cover. You can't do it.
Nope.
Just, you don't like the description. You can just, as a self-published author, you can say, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try that. And so you have all that flexibility. But it just depends on what your goals are. There's no right answer. It just depends on what you want.
For me, word of mouth has helped me a lot, and being connected, with education. My book is a type of diversity kind of topic, so I'm being solicited by book clubs and libraries, as well as schools, and doing presentations usually help with marketing. So that's how I've been doing it.
Yeah.
My marketing, I've been giving my book away. So it's like, it's to get word of mouth. It sounds crazy, but it's like, there's like researched, like experts will tell you that you can do that to get beta readers or advanced reader copies and stuff like that. Because the more people that read it, right, if they like it, they'll tell their friends, and then eventually you'll hit, in theory, a tipping point where it kind of takes on a life of its own.
Interesting. So I know reviews like on Goodreads and Amazon are really important right now.
Yeah.
So are you guys pursuing reviews, or how do you do that?
Whenever anyone tells you they loved your book, you say like, oh, did you leave a review? Could you leave a review? Would you mind leaving a review? Here's a link directly to where you can leave a review. I don't know about you guys. So I have an email list. It's in its infancy, but that's actually all the marketing people say that's the way to go. to have your own email list, because then you have direct contact with your customers. I think you can also sometimes in Goodreads, if someone left a review and they were like, oh, I can't wait to read the second book. And so when my second book is done, like I'm going to send her an instant message, a personal message on Goodreads, like, do you want to be a beta reader or an early reader and stuff like that? So you can have a little bit of connection that way too.
Yeah, Holly said a couple important things there. One is giving away your book. I was enrolled in Amazon, so I couldn't really make it free in the program that I was in that had to do with page reads and different things. So, but what I could do is I marked it all the way down to 99 cents, and I practically gave it away for 99 cents until I hit 100 reviews. And so that's one thing, is if you're giving your book away or making your book, really affordable for people, then you're more likely to get reviews. You're more likely to get, and then every time Amazon would let me, I would run a 5-day promotion where I gave it away, and I would give away literally 600, 700 books through that promotion where I just give it away. And then your hope is that they'll appreciate that and they'll read it and like it and review your book. The other important thing you said was an email list. Email lists are very important to start building that. I don't think I've done a great job in that space, but it's something that I'm also working on. One thing I did for a while was give away. You can do it a couple ways. You can, you offer a little bit of a carrot. So you can give away chapters. You could give away your whole first book to say, hey, I'll give you my book if you sign up for my email list. And you can collect emails that way. And I've done some of that as well. So those are all good ways to get there.
Great. This is like a master class in self-publishing.
Yeah. And if you write so my lead magnet is what they call it, is like a short story. So even if you're traditionally published, that short story is yours. So you could still do that even if you're traditionally published. You could do like you could take your characters and like, here they are at Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever. Mine was like a prequel. Like this is what happened like before. And that way you can use that regardless of how you're published.
I rolled into my mayor's office here in my city, and I said, hey, here's a book. Somebody in your community wrote this. And that has really he really liked it. I mean, that it helps that they like it once you give it to them, because from that, the high schools have me coming, parent groups have been calling me because the mayor of Franklin Park really liked the book. So that's how giving the book helps, because especially if you give it to key people and be strategic of who, if you just give it to your friend, then, they might tell their friends, but it doesn't really get farther. But it's the people who are up higher. I even went as far as having a stamp, those ink stamps, and it says donated by Pasquala, and here's my email and my, website. That way they have my information handy. So, because I donated it to them.
That's a great idea. I want to quick check in with Larissa. Do we have time for another question, or should we go over to questions from our people in the group, in the audience, I should say?
I think we have time for one more question, and then we can open it up to the audience.
Okay, sounds great. Well, my last question for you is, what's next for you? Are you working on something now? Do you have plans to work on something? What's next in your writing life? Some of you have already alluded to this, but tell us a little more.
Yeah, I'm working on book 2 in my series. So that's why I have my do my draft to the developmental editors due at the end of this month. So I've been cramming getting that baby as ready as I can.
Nice.
That's exciting.
Ladies first.
Yeah, I'm working on my third book. And I think for most of this year, it'll be promoting the 2 books I published last year, the memoir and the children's book. But I also know that I already have an idea for my third book. So I would just dedicate a month and I can crank it out. I'm that confident. I have it pretty much, I'm always thinking about it. So, and it's nonfiction. So it's, not a plot or, it's just more of the thinking that I have. So.
Well, I'm still editing and at my current manuscript, and I am noodling around ideas for my next book.
Nice. Yeah, so we just finished producing the third book as an Audible, and it's going through the quality checks now, and then will come out hopefully in a month. So that'll be on Audible. And then the fourth book is sitting with the editor, and she's starting on it this month. So it's written and she has it, and she's starting she's done the story check, so she's read through the whole thing. I made some minor adjustments based on her feedback, and now she has it for the full edit. So we'll start that process. And then, yeah, I've got to start writing the fifth and final book of the series. So I'm going to start that. And I didn't mention this earlier, but I also like to sometimes take a little bit of a break, just a short break. So while I was waiting on this one to go into edit, I finished it, in November maybe. So there's been a little bit of a gap. And rather than go right in and start writing the fifth book, I needed a break, but I still wanted to write. So I'm about 30,000 words into another book in another genre. So it's going to be, I know there's a lot of these in the world, but it's going to be a book. It's going to be kind of a zombie apocalypse, but it's about this married couple that are on the verge of divorce. And when this whole thing happens, they have to kind of, work through their marriage issues, or one of them needs to feed the other one to the zombies. So we'll see where that ends up at. So that one. And then you talked about serial killers, Holly. I'm also about 25,000 words into a story I've been writing about a serial killer. So I'm
Nice.
bouncing around. I know I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit, but I enjoy all those genres, I guess. And so I'm kind of dabbling, but as soon as this edit gets underway, I will go right back into writing book 5, because I know my readers will want it. I need to get going on it, because I'd like to be ready to publish that one then at the beginning of next year for the 5th book. And then I can pick back up on my other stuff, or whatever. But that's kind of where I'm at on the writing journey right now.
Well, thanks. Boy, I can't wait to see all the stuff that comes out of this. Before I turn it over maybe to Larissa, or we take some audience questions, one thing I want to mention is, for all of you out there who are aspiring writers, maybe have a manuscript in the works, the 2022 manuscript contest is about to close, meaning the entries will be accepted up until January 15th. So if you've got something, you still have some time to turn it in and participate in the contest. And then our next book, the regular fiction book and Spanish language book contest, will begin. I think that will begin like in spring sometime. Don't hold me to that. May. Okay, I just got some help from one of my colleagues here. It'll begin in May. So keep that in mind. And if you want to know more about the contest, please go to soon-to-be-famous.info, and you can read about these people who have won and others, and subscribe to the newsletter, and you'll find out all the details about when everything's coming up. So Larissa, do we have questions?
Oh, and it's free. You should mention that it's free to enter. A lot of times those contest stuff, you have to pay an entry fee, and this one is totally free.
This is totally free, and it's totally librarian run. All the judges are librarians. So that's what makes it a little bit different than some of these other contests. So thank you all.
I think that's great.
All right. Thank you all so much. Such a great discussion. And thank you, Lucy, for moderating. And there
Thank
are
you.
a couple of questions in the chat, and if anyone has any more, feel free to drop them in. One of them is, can you suggest a paid professional reviewer company respected by librarians?
And Larissa, that's really for you. Like if somebody wanted to get their book in your library, like I know like the biggest names are Kirkus and Publishers Weekly. but they're expensive. They're very
Yeah,
expensive.
they are.
They're like $400 to get a review. But are there any things that if you saw that you would have?
How does that work? I've never heard of that. So you buy a review?
Yeah, you
how
pay
does
them $400 and then in 8 weeks they read your, in an 8-week chunk they read it and then they print a review.
And
you're not guaranteed a good review. You're just
Wow.
guaranteed a review. Windy City Times will do it. Like, I'm a member of the Chicago Writing Association and it's free, but I think it's like $50 if you're not a member. But those are the only ones I know about.
Yeah, there's a
Okay.
lot of paid services out there for like Literary Titans one. I mean, there's a lot of, if you just a quick Google search that you can pay them to review your book. And a lot of them won't post that review on Amazon because Amazon does not like paid reviews. But you can put that review, so you can get that review and then you can add it to your Amazon page as an editorial review. So you have an option where you can go in and add that review. But usually the paid services are not, not ones you would want to or expect to have on Amazon. If that helps at all.
Somebody asked here, is Blue Ink respected? Are any of you familiar with Blue Ink as a reviewer?
Haven't heard of it.
Okay.
Also see a question from somebody about whether if you have already traditionally published, if you can enter this contest. And the answer is yes, as long as the piece that you're entering, you own the rights to. It's not been published, it's not been purchased by a publisher, there's no agreement with a publisher. So yes, absolutely.
Have you had more, can you apply again? I guess that's my question. So if I wrote another book, can I enter it again?
You certainly can. We'd love it.
Okay, and another question. How do you define success as an author? At what point do you feel you've reached that goal?
It's different for everybody, I think. I mean, I felt like as soon as I hit the publish button on my first book, I felt success. That's for me, my long-term plan for writing was to write books. If I can get one out a year, great, until I retire, and then have a catalog going into retirement, and then just write because I just love to do it, right? And if something happened and it blew up or a book blew up, and that's like icing on the cake. But for me, success has been just writing and publishing in general has been, what I've enjoyed. So but it's different for everybody.
I think for me, like if it paid for itself,
That'd be nice.
That's my first level of success. Like it pays for itself. And then I think my next level is like, if I could make like, what was it? I think like $1,000 a month. Like for me, that would be like, sweet. I'm like pulling my weight in this family. And then everything, and when I hit that, we'll say when, because it's a good affirmation thing, then I would move up from there.
Yeah, that's good.
For me, it's the feedback. That's when I know I'm successful, because I can think I have a great book, but it's not until the feedback or people calling me and saying how I touched them, or that is what means to me that I was successful.
I agree about feedback. Just when I hear, I've had beta readers who've read my book, and knowing that they were engaged with the story and liked it, and that makes me feel successful, knowing that I could reach someone like that.
Yeah, it's always kind of funny too. Like every once in a while, someone will say something nice and they'll sound surprised. Like, hey, I really like that. And that's how I know it's genuine, right? It's not just like, oh, your book was great. And sometimes you're like, do you really think it's great? Because I don't know that that's your thing. But every once in a while, somebody will say something that's, somebody told me once they were up till 1 a.m. reading it. And I was like, oh, that's like the best ever.
That is awesome.
That's really nice.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, those are all the questions I see. So unless there's lots of thank yous, thank you so much for this excellent panel. You're welcome, Melissa. Thank you to all of our authors and Lucy who have spent this time. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your effort. I appreciate your writing. And I thank you so much. I'll just let everyone know that tomorrow I will send out an email with the recording of this whole panel presentation. I'll send out links to all of our authors' websites here, the soon to be famous website, if anyone didn't catch it. And also our local bookstore, Galena Book and Paper, is also, if you'd like to support our local bookstore, they have a page of LitFest books up for purchase on bookshop.org. So I'll send that link out as well. And I'm going to drop a program evaluation in right now. We always appreciate
and also,
those.
If you don't mind, like if anyone has any questions, like I feel like I made so many mistakes that I'm always so happy to answer other people's questions, other writers. They're like, what should I do about this? And I'll say like, I don't know, but here's one thing you should never, ever do and stuff. So when I don't know, I guess I can't speak for everyone else, but for me, if you have a question later on, you can contact me directly through my website. I'm happy to answer questions. You won't be bothered.
Same here. Yeah, same here. I also want to say before everybody goes, this has been so cool to get to hang out with you guys and meet all of you guys kind of in person. So this has been really neat. Appreciate the time.
All right. Thank you. And keep in mind that there will be LitFest events for the next 2 weeks. I have events coming up until the 22nd. Pasquale and Hollie are both doing their own individual presentations as well. So be sure to check out on Eventbrite all of our events that we have coming up. You can subscribe to us on Eventbrite and see, because we have authors all throughout the year as well. So I'd be happy to have you subscribe there and on our YouTube channel where we post our recordings. So I thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.